Hello everyone and welcome back to another midweek altered video. Educational content today. We're going to be going through 5 cards for each faction that you can and should probably keep in mind as you play out a game. For each faction that we're going through today, which is Axiom, Bravos and Lyra, we're going to pick 5 cards out of the potential card pool that will impact the outcome of a game when they come down. And obviously the list of cards that can and will win your opponent a game is greater than 5, but these are, I think, both commonly played and have some little flags that you can keep in mind before they come down, that sort of telegraph what your opponent is planning on doing. List won't be exhaustive, so if you have any suggestions or other cards you think you should be keeping in mind, feel free to comment down below. Let me know if I missed anything. And the only thing is that you can see that these 3 lists we're going through today have more than 5 cards in them, so we're going to outline a couple of cards that might play well with our original 5, and just a couple of honourable mentions as well that aren't either as common or as telegraphed. So let's get started. We'll go through Axiom first, and in no particular order. We're going to start with Brassbug Hive. This one's obviously a big game winner if it can come down and stay unanswered. If your opponent gets 2 of them as well, it becomes very hard to deal with all the extra stats that they'll be getting each turn. But the good thing is that a lot of the opportunities to play it are highly telegraphed. So if they want to get it down early, they're going to play some sort of cost reducer out of reserve, so your Foundry Mechanics, etc. And the answers are fairly common. So every colour has access to conditionless permanent removal that can get rid of it, and it also has the advantage of being mana positive for you. So obviously at rare, your opponent will both be getting a Brassbug and the boost there. So it puts 3 points worth of stats down, but you can usually answer it for that 3 or 4 mana and still come out ahead and have a chance to answer everything else that your opponent wants to do. Next up is a Nancy. So this card is obviously much better played when your opponent has a full reserve. So if you see that your opponent is filling up their reserve, maybe they're cracking their Aerolith tokens, or just have things on field that can fill it up quickly, this can represent a lot of stats for a relatively low mana cost. The good thing is that it gets hit by most removal in the game, so your classic off you goes, your teamwork trainings, etc. So if you see that your opponent has a full reserve, think about a Nancy. Keep it in mind, maybe don't get rid of that removal, because odds are, with the way that Axiom is set up, if they're playing from hand, this is one of the stat positive characters that they're going to be able to play. A lot of their cards are either low in stats for the mana you put into them from hand, but obviously it can be a bit of a hit if they're playing out of a reserve a lot. So Sabotage will reduce the power it has, and also just make it more difficult for them to play around. Getting rid of cards is good. A 2-for-1 special here. We've got Avalanche and Blizzard. We'll go through both of those. So these are the most common removal choices for Axiom decks these days. Avalanche at rare, very mana positive, can get rid of a lot of stats, especially if you have asymmetrical characters in play. So something where it's like 302 with nothing in the mountain is just free. And then you've got Blizzard as well, which gets around toughness and wipes an expedition. So both of these cards at 3 and 5 mana can be seen if your opponent is playing a bit slow in order to preserve that mana and see what else you want to play out. Maybe consider splitting your characters over both expeditions so they can't hit both. And when you see your opponent go below that 5, you can play with a bit more impunity and try and win an expedition on one side. When you're ahead, there can be the tendency, I suppose, to stack one side, and Blizzard can be a very big blowout for that. So keep it in mind, play a bit slow if they're sort of looking to play around that 5 mana, especially for a turn or two if they're thinking about it. And yeah, you should be able to play around that one. Hooked is another one. So switching your character's expeditions and drawing a card is very powerful. It can turn a 2 for 0 in your favour into a 1 for 1 quite easily, and potentially has the option of swapping it around and making it a 2 for nothing for your opponent. One of the, I suppose, hidden techniques with this card is that they just move things around because it's spending 1 card 4 mana to draw 2 cards, which can be very important. So if this comes out early, your opponent's likely using it to draw the cards, which can flag to you that their hand is not great. However, maintains a lot of its power into the late game when you're trying to trade 1 for 1, because it will impact the amount of stats that you're showing to your opponent on both sides, which can be good or bad. Mostly bad if they're playing it. The last one to think about is Brassbug Dropship. Both at common and rare, when it's sacrificed, it makes a 2/2/2 bug in each expedition. If it's sacrificed is as part of cleanup at the end of the day, they'll have those 2 bugs around next turn, and it can represent a lot of stats for not as much mana if they find a way to sacrifice it as well. So plays well with cards like Boom or any of the other ones that sacrifice when they enter, to put stats on the board, sort of preloading that for a much bigger turn later on, or just sort of continuing the pressure. One thing to note is that it is a sacrifice trigger, and as such, if you discard it with, say, a copy of License Withdrawal or Lost in the Woods, they actually don't get the bugs. So, might be something to think about if you're already winning, just pointing it at that, in order to keep their bugs from helping them catch up throughout the game. And the honourable mention for Axiom is Mechanical Training. So never the best card in the deck, but this can represent a 4th, 5th and or 6th copy of your opponent's permanent enter abilities. Seen a lot at the common rarity with a 1/3 or a 1/2 power cost, and in the late game, if they have something to point this at, it can be a pseudo after you effect, help them draw a card or resupply, add in a bug with the brass bug hives that we were talking about before. Didn't make the list because it's not as easy to play around, but if you expect that your opponent's playing around this card and they need it, you can always just sort of hit those permanents that they would want to get value out of. Alright, that's Axiom done. And we'll move on to Bravos. Again, in no particular order, we're just going to go through. So, the Hunger. Obviously, a big ticket card, game changer, creates a lot of feel bad situations. Not sure it's worth copying a ban because it is somewhat telegraphed to play around for reasons we'll get into, but it can represent a lot of stats. If there are lots of permanents on board, lots of cards in reserve, lots of characters on the field, 8 mana, it's very easy to get this stat positive. You only need to get rid of 5 cards. And then the big ticket out of the rare version, which is what you will most commonly see, will be that clause of if it's fleeting, it's also got gigantic. Now, that ties in to a couple of the other cards on this list here, showing the rare versions also quite commonly seen at the common rarity as well. But Rage, so giving a character boosts and fleeting, obviously works well with the Hunger. A 9 mana play, so Bravos has to ramp into it. You can see fairly early on that if your opponent is ramping heavily to try and play into their copies of the Hunger, it might be a good idea to keep around your removal and sleep for that effect. So your Sandman's Twinkle Twinkles also work. They obviously do not deal with the card on board for next turn, and you want conditionless or a form of removal that hits it, so license withdrawals again, banishing gates out of Izmir. But every faction has a way to deal with this through sleep as well. So Hypothermia, Twinkle Twinkle, Beauty Sleep, and the Sandman. I think that covers all 4 factions. And if you're worried about this card, or your plan plays into having a wide board and a lot of cards in reserve, think about those. Arcolano Milk and Rage both fill the same niche. They will add a boost when they go to the bin. Rage at common can be recurable, but chaining Hungers with it is hard because it'll get rid of it. So if you see your opponent playing an Arcolano Milk out when they're on 9 mana or more, and you're expecting a Hunger out, sometimes it can be advantageous to get rid of the Arcolano Milk. Say you've got a copy of the Grems in reserve, or even your permanent removal, might be suited to hitting that. Talked about that one a lot. Big card, very telegraphed, but we'll keep moving on. So Parliament of Ashes. This one can be a bit rough to remove because it replaces itself. Either at the rare version, it draws a card, at common, it resupplies. But going 1 for 1 when your opponent's already drawn a card off of it can feel bad, and sometimes it is better to just play away from it, especially if they stack up 2 of them. But the plan either has to be getting rid of this straight away, which is rough because it uses one of your removal spells that you'd rather point to other things. But that tough one can make it difficult to go mana positive on exchanges. So if you see this card come down, don't immediately get rid of all of your removal. You just have to think about it a little bit more, because it will cost you more to get rid of something of value. An example of that would be, say, using your teamwork trainings on Buddha tokens. Obviously it turns a 2 mana spell into a 3 mana spell. So what you want to be doing is changing the way you evaluate what's worth hitting with removal. If they've stacked up a lot of boosts on something, it's still worth it because you're taking, more mana off the board on their side than you're taking away from your mana. But to expand on that, say they've got a character down with a physical training boost on top of it. It's at minimum going to be a 3/3/3, probably more. And if you have a way to remove that, if you're getting rid of, say, 5 or 6 points worth of stats for 3 mana, it's still a favourable trade for you because they've paid into it. And you probably won't be able to beat them on that side if you don't get rid of it. So don't just get rid of all your removal, just reevaluate when you see this one come down. Colourful Cuckoo. So gaining boosts when characters join your expeditions can make it difficult to challenge on that side while it's out. Obviously it's around for 4 turns if they get the full value out of both anchored counters, and when it goes to reserve at the rare versions, it actually ramps you as well. It can ramp itself out of when it's played from hand, because it'll go to reserve on its own, and it can be a little bit difficult to play around. The ways you want to do that is either not playing into it, so just challenge the other expedition. Obviously on the turns that it's going to go away, they'll have the extra value of the cuckoo from the start. But the other way to deal with it is, if you're not playing Basira specifically, you can play a 3/3/3 creature onto that side and still win. And if they want to challenge, you're free to do more things on the other expedition. However, discard spells actually do it as well. So getting rid of a cuckoo, even if it would go to reserve because it doesn't have fleeting, license withdrawal obviously hits it if it's boosted, but your banishing gates as well will also do that. When you're seeing this card come out of reserve, also think about helping hand, because that will allow them to ramp once again. Obviously your opponent's going down a lot of card advantage because they would have to reserve, have to mana something else from reserve on the first hit. But if this can come back at any given point, it can be a lot of mana that your opponent will be ahead. A Clut. So obviously this card is a banger. At rare, it will exhaust a card when it comes in on both hand and reserve plays. With Basira, it can actually exhaust both your cards in reserve as well. So start thinking about this card when you have a full reserve. If you're playing first against a Bravos or Muna hero that might have a Clut in their deck, so Tages mostly for Muna, think about playing your cards out of reserve first so they can't be hit with the exhaust. Obviously that opens them up to removal, and it does play around sabotage as well, playing out of reserve, because sometimes you want to play something first like a sabotage, and then getting blown out by the Clut can really impact the way your turns play out. But when you are thinking about this card, or you think you're weak to it, consider playing stuff out of reserve first. Yeah. The last one to talk about of the 5 is Duel of Grit. So removal spells in Altered obviously take up a large chunk of many decks. Duel of Grit in particular works well with Bravos because many heroes are incentivized to play large creatures, and as such you want to, if you see creatures of a certain value come out, sometimes it will be advantageous for you to play out a slightly larger creature. So if they play a 3-drop, say they're sabotaging, and you have a 2-drop and a 4-drop in hand, consider playing the 4-drop first so that it can't be hit by Duel of Grit. They're forced to play out something else to continue their turn, and if they go under that 2 mana, you don't have to worry about it, and your 2-drop will be free to stick on the board. So you've blanked a card in their hand. The other side of this is your opponent's mana eruptions, I believe. That was the other one that was considered in this removal spot. Obviously, discarding one of your mana orbs is a heavy cost to pay, but with Bravos's tendency to ramp ahead, if you see 1 or 2 ramps, start thinking about that card as well. And the honourable mention, Kybara, Escarthed Leviathan. This sort of works as a stand-in for all of Bravos's stat positive characters, so things like Your Haven Warriors or your Priyas also fit here. Kybara, not stat positive, but it represents stats on both sides. So they're paying 9 for 16 points worth of stats. Obviously, it's hard to get rid of as well, but it can be telegraphed in that they can't play it before they get to 9 mana. So once you're in that late game, start thinking about this one, start considering what it is that you can do to beat it. Even with the tough X, a lot of spells will still end up mana positive when this comes down in the game. So licensed withdrawals, even if they cost 5, you're getting 16 points worth of stats off the board. Banishing Gates, same thing, a little bit more expensive, but your Sandmans, your Beauty Sleeps, they also hit it, and that might be enough to get you over the line if you keep those cards in hand. So think about that one. And then we're on to Lyra cards as well. So we'll start off with the most obvious one, Lyra Festival Counting Sheep. Counting Sheep sort of gets the go here because of Lyra Festival. And what these cards do is they provide an alternative win condition for your opponent. They have value as well at the rare copy with Lyra specifically, can actually give Fleeting Anchored or Asleep as well instead of just drawing a card. But if your opponent is keeping up 4 mana and they have some combination of Fleeting Anchored and Asleep on the field, this one might be something to think about. So your conditionless removal will also probably be positive into this one, and if they're playing into it, they have to largely win on that turn. It can do things for you as you move through days, but it works best as a bit of a gotcha. So the important thing to keep in mind when playing against decks you think might have Lyra Festival in them is the availability of mana. So Counting Sheep gives you 2 characters to give Anchored, Fleeting and Asleep to. They come in with Asleep, so at 6 mana they won't be able to play it out and win unless they've got a fleeting character on the field from a previous turn. But as they get access to more mana, they will find more and more lines to play around what it is that you can do to remove. So the later the game goes, keep your conditionless removal a lot more. The important breakpoints are obviously 6. If they have access to mana reduction as well, that can accelerate their plan, and a lot of decks do play a lot of that. We'll get into some of that later, but Martingales, Incasters, all have text on them that gives them extra mana. So they won't be ramping in the same way Bravos will, but they might have more bursts of mana, and we'll have to see if Mana Seed tokens actually impact the viability of Lyra Festival into something unreasonable. Good segue, because the next card that we're thinking about is Ouroboros Inkcaster. This is a good way to get value out of Lyra hand abilities for characters, recur cards as well. So one of the cards that isn't on this list because it's kind of just a staple but there's no real way to play around it is Magical Training. So costing 1 from hand, 3 from mana. Obviously this will let them go 1 card deeper into their deck, sculpt their hand a little bit better, and if they can chain 2 of them around through reserve by playing 1 on one turn, the next on the other, they can generate a lot of incidental card advantage that way. Ways to play around this is by either sabotaging what it is they're going to want to recur. So Sabotage plays well against Inkcaster. If it's the only card in reserve, they get no value out of it, and then it's just a vanilla 2 for 2/2/2. It does have the added text at rare that it makes the next card you play cheaper, so think about that one. And these tend to go hand in hand with those decks that want to recycle cards. Will-o'-the-Wisp. This is another one that changes the way the board will play out, especially on turn 1. Generally, it will guarantee a 1-for-1 trade. Obviously, if you're playing first, they will be able to challenge with the Will-O-Wisp on that side. So if you have no follow-up, they're just going to take a 1-for-nothing. So if you're up against Lyra decks, consider making a two-card play on turn 1 just to play around it if you have the option. So if you've got enough cards that you can mana and still play 2 cards out on turn 1, that will deal with this one. And obviously if it gets resupplied, they get access to that reduced value as well, reduced cost value as well. Daedalus, so sneaky deaky card here, central at rare to a lot of Lyra loops, so rolling a die to put a card back in hand is a big deal. That actually happens in my most recent version of Navenka and Blotch. I'm not sure if it's been showcased on the channel yet, but 1 mana to put out a boost on a character, half the time gets itself a boost. So if you see roll a die, recur a card, that in the unique slots out of your opponent, that is 1 to think about, and the big mana breakpoint is 4 as well. So for the full 4 mana of scouting it and then playing it, Daedalus actually adds up to 5 points worth of stats on its own in brown and green, plus the 2 that the other card will obviously get as well. So if you're playing out into expeditions that only have some combination of brown and blue, this card can be a bit of a blowout. I'm highlighting it both for its combo potential and its potential to add stats in 2 expeditions, so you have to worry about it a little bit less if you're playing into green. Obviously that plays fairly funny with some Mooner lists, but still comes up in every game. You have to get through green expeditions in order to advance to the point where your 2 tokens meet in the middle. The last card on the list is Nuit. This card is incredibly stinky to play against if your opponent gets it set up. So 9 or more base statistics of 0 among characters you control and in reserve will force both players to pass. It adds 3 of those statistics itself, and Lyra has a lot of ways to resupply it as well. So Fen and Crowbar, the Lyra Festival lists, you probably won't see this, but the ones that play to board a lot more or put a lot of things in reserve, this can be a big blowout. So if your opponent is playing first and they have 6 or more base statistics of 0 amongst their cards in play and reserve, you're almost guaranteed to take at least a 1-for-nothing, potentially a 2-for-nothing if they're really well set up. So hitting certain cards with removal, if you think this is coming up, to stop them from playing it on the following turn is definitely the play. It's a hard one to play around because sometimes they'll just have it and there's nothing you can do. Creates a double advance. I believe the common copy that we're not representing here actually has stats as well. It just costs more too. So if they're playing that one out and they know that they've got it, it can represent a double advance. So as you get into the later stages of the game where your opponent is either 1 or 2 advances away from winning, start thinking about this card. If you have the play, sabotage something to get it down under that threshold to let them pass, and then the card is relatively dead in hand. And then our honourable mentions are Eris and Loki. So big ticket characters that will change the texture of the game significantly. If your opponent is holding up 7 mana in order to play, or you've just gone through a turn where you've drawn a lot of cards, think about Loki. This one's not very common, so it didn't make the actual list, but it is very hard to get blown out. So if you've got, 6 or 7 cards in hand, a couple cards in reserve, this card can represent going down the number of cards you have access to by a whole lot. Not super common, but one to think about if you're well set up. And then the other one is Eris as well. So obviously at rare, this card has the option to stop your opponent from moving if they are particularly unlucky. But both common and rare, it does change the way that you will be able to challenge. So if you lose on the side that Eris is played on, you may lose advantage even if you're going 1 for 1, because they have a 50-50 shot at going 2 for 1. Not an easy one to play around if they play it late in a turn, but if they play it early, definitely consider challenging on that side, even if it stops you from advancing as well. That's a bit more of a situational decision to make, but even the potential of going down 2 for 1 when you're trading can be a difficult one. It's either a good catch-up mechanic or one to get ahead. Obviously, the Nevenka list playing the rare Martingales as well will mitigate this, and the things to think about is that it moves it to a 2 in 3 chance that they will move ahead twice if Martingale is out. So sometimes hitting that can be a good idea if you've got no other option, but your first choice should be to try and hit the Eris. In Nevenka in particular, challenging on the side that Eris is on may incentivize your opponent to boost it in order to get the boost. If they have the Martingale, they're not going to have the option, but there's also that 1 in 6 chance that it just gets sent to reserve or the bin. And that is one to think about, but not quite on the same level as all these other things, just in terms of commonality. And that's it. That is 15 cards plus a few to think about in Bravos, Axiom, and Lyra matchups. Let me know if I missed any. Obviously, all of the tips that I gave here, or all of the things to think about, are also valid for the common rarities and the out-of-faction types as well. Depending on the different interactions between the cards in those factions, it can be either more or less dangerous in given situations, but we're given the option. I wanted to represent the cards where they were most commonly played. So obviously the Hunger in Bravos is a Izmir card, but it is mostly played in Bravos because they have access to the ramps. And we're done. Waffled on a little bit at points there, but hopefully it is educational and something you can come back to, or keep in mind in your games moving forward. These are ones that I definitely think about when I'm playing. So that's it, we're done. We'll be back next time with our regular gameplay video, and as always, love your work.